Thank you very much. These are some hard acts to follow, and I'd also like to thank Dr. Jaiswal and NICE for this incredible thing that they've organized. It really has been extremely useful. I'm going to talk a little bit about the research outcomes from a 2-year project we did at Chatham House looking at perceptions of strategic shifts in the Indo-Pacific, because the countries' perceptions of each other underlie a lot of what we've just been talking about, how effectively we can build partnerships or not, and looking at each of the countries in terms of how they view the other and where the barriers are, the real barriers and the barriers that have been created by political warfare by third parties to create artificial barriers in order to make it more difficult to build those partnerships. So what we did is we selected 7 countries that had growing interest or were in the Indo-Pacific: the US, the UK, France, India, the Kingdom of Tonga, Japan, and China, and held workshops and discussions with the strategic communities and partnerships with think tanks in each of those countries. In India, we were very lucky to have as our partner Gateway House, and I think some of the people who helped us with the research are on this call. I'd like to thank them very much. We did the workshops and the field research between September 2019 and March 2020. So we flew out of Tokyo on March 2020. So it was before the world changed, BC, before COVID. And it was a very useful baseline, actually. And what we found was across all 7 countries, except for 6 countries, except for China, talk about China separately, there were 3 dynamics at play in terms of the development of the strategies towards the Indo-Pacific. The first was there were a lot of internal divisions about how to deal specifically with China, which is, of course, the central point for how you're developing your Indo-Pacific strategy. And it was, as has been mentioned before, essentially a division between the economic and political communities, because the economic community gives a lot of money to the political community in democracies particularly, and the defense strategic and intelligence communities, who were much more concerned about China. So political and economic communities wanted to figure out how to work with China more effectively, and the defense, security, intelligence communities were much more concerned about that. So that internal division was there everywhere, and we saw the kind of touchstone topics were Huawei, for example, where a country would go on Huawei. There's certain things that kept popping up all over the place. The second thing that we found all over was uncertainty, very, very high levels of uncertainty. So in the UK, it was Brexit. In the US, it was the upcoming presidential election. There were major events, and we heard over and over that things were more uncertain than they had ever felt before. And this was before COVID. And the result of that, those internal divisions and the uncertainty, were countries were hedging as much as they possibly could. They were putting off making decisions. They were trying to keep their options open as much as they could. So that was that 6 months of field research. Then came COVID, the world shut down, and a whole series of other events happened. We had the increasing Chinese aggression in the South China Sea and the East China Sea, the blocking of the information around COVID coming out of Taiwan, the tariffs against Australia, the punitive tariffs against Australia, and in the case of India, the horrific events up at Galwan, where 20 Indian soldiers were ambushed and killed. And as was mentioned, as you mentioned, Dr. Jacobs, that was an event that really, I think, changed not only India, but possibly the entire Indo-Pacific. I think that was an event that we may look back on it as a sort of, shooting of Archduke Ferdinand type moment, where suddenly things changed at a really fundamental level. Because what we saw was India has, yes, it has a whole non-aligned movement, and it has an issue with Russia and has all that sort of stuff, but it also has an extremely informed and very sophisticated defense, intelligence, and security community that were given the room to move all of a sudden. And so one of the first moves that happened as a result of Galwan was the banning of the Chinese apps, 59 apps. Suddenly that cut off the intelligence flow, the all sorts of stuff. We could go into why the apps are important for another reason. Also, they were rolling up us on the spy networks. There was a blocking of Chinese FDI. The Indian approach to China dramatically changed internally, created a a comprehensive national defense to China's comprehensive national power, but it also allowed for India to start signing a bunch of international agreements like BECA with the US and AXA with Japan, and rolling with the Quad with Malabar in a way that we hadn't seen before. So what we ended up with, kind of a year after March 2020, when the field research stopped, in March 2021, suddenly we were seeing a lot less internal divisions. More countries were willing to make decisions about Huawei, for example, like the UK did. We saw less international uncertainty. The sky didn't fall when Brexit happened, and a little bit less hedging. The issue now is, so we've seen that momentum shift. The perceptions of the partners, the importance of the partners to each other have shifted. India looks more important to the U.S. The U.S. looks more important to India. We're looking at each other a little bit differently. But those elements of political warfare that are in place and the elite capture that's in place hasn't gone away. So there's momentum, but it's not inevitable, which is why some of these ideas, for example, that Professor Gunasekara Rockwell brought up about ways of institutionalizing it while the window is still open will be essential, I think, if we're going to keep this ball rolling. So we've seen a fundamental shift over the last 2 years of at least the research that we've been looking at the way that the Indo-Pacific is looked at externally and functions internally, and will be undoubtedly going to be going through more changes over the next year or two. And the direction it goes in is going to depend a lot on perceptions of other countries, and it's going to depend a lot on the smaller countries, the relatively smaller countries like Nepal or like Singapore or like Malaysia. So that's one of the reasons why I'm particularly grateful to NICE for having a seminar and this topic on now. Thank you.